Be careful what you wish for. The MAGA Republicans and the Federalist Society spent decades trying to destroy agencies and the ability of agencies to exercise a level of discretion, something called Chevron deference, which existed in the law really since the 1980s, saying courts need to show a great deal of deference to the decision making by agencies and the executive branch that orders the agencies to do things and not do things. But we're also starting to see, though, as the MAGA Republicans and the Federalist Society chiseled away and destroyed this concept called Chevron deference, of federal courts paying a great deal of deference. For that and a number of other reasons, whether they're citing the Administrative Procedures Act or other grounds, I think federal courts feel a greater sense and obligation to analyze decisions that are being instructed by the executive branch to agencies to do and not do things. And it's oftentimes for the agencies to literally try to kill themselves, to implode the very function of the agency, which is being viewed, and the language in a lot of these cases is as arbitrary and capricious and without any basis upon the laws with which Congress appropriated money to be used. And so when we're seeing a lot of these judgments that are being issued, or rather these rulings that are being issued from these federal courts, they're often finding it on grounds of the procedural way in which the administrative decisions were made. Were there appropriate notice periods? Were things being communicated to the public within time? Are the decisions arbitrary and capricious to what the underlying law suggested? I'll just give you one example of it right here. It's a federal judge who Biden appointed, but we're seeing this: Biden appointees, Trump appointees, Reagan appointees, George W. Bush appointees. In many ways, by the way, it seems that the MAGAs are going even more forcefully after, like John Bates, the George W. Bush appointee, who simply said, restore the websites of HHS and the FDA and a few others. I saw Elon Musk and Trump fire that judge, the George W. Bush judge. Maybe you want to say his name. Fire Judge Carl Nichols. You mean the Trump appointed judge? Okay. So we're seeing a lot of these judges issue these orders regardless, but this is a Biden appointed judge, Judge Ali, and he's addressing the USAID freeze on aid, the freeze on or the termination of the employees. And what Judge Ali says is that here, the stated purpose in implementing the suspension by the Trump administration of all foreign aid is to provide the opportunity to review programs for their efficiency and consistency with priorities. However, at least to date, defendants have not offered any explanation why a blanket suspension of all congressionally appropriated foreign aid, which set off a shockwave and upended reliance interests for thousands of agreements with businesses, nonprofits, and organizations around the country, was a rational precursor to reviewing the program. The most defendants offer is the possibility that some of the abruptly terminated contracts might have had clauses which allowed termination in certain circumstances. However, as defendants have acknowledged that they implemented a blanket suspension that was not based on the presence or consideration of such contractual terms. Here's the language. To be sure, there is nothing arbitrary and capricious about executive agencies conducting a review of programs, but there has been no explanation offered in the record, let alone a satisfactory explanation, including a rational connection between the facts found and the choice made as to why the reviewing programs, many long-standing and taking place pursuant to the contractual terms, required an immediate and wholesale suspension of appropriated foreign aid. And then they go on to say as well, plaintiffs have also shown that the implementation of blanket suspensions is likely arbitrary and capricious, and given the apparent failure to consider immense reliance interest including among the business and other nonprofits across the country. So, Harry, it was a long intro, but I wanted to target that language right there and how the courts are balancing this in a logical way. You want to review it? Of course, review it. But a blanket suspension, that's arbitrary. That's capricious. You haven't given me a satisfactory explanation at all. What do you make of all this, Harry?
Yeah, so it's all true, and there's many kinds of themes we could explore here, Ben, but one of them is the point you made. These were doctrines developed over the years by conservatives in particular to try to fight back against what they saw as the liberal state and liberal courts. And we have just once again and again being hoisted by their own petard. So here, what's basically going on in all these cases is Congress appropriates money, and the Trump administration just saying, no, we don't want to. We want to check it out and see whether it accords with our priorities. Sorry, that's third grade stuff. Congress passes bills, sends money, and you execute it. And there are other ways also in which they're going to be running into buzzsaws of conservative doctrine. In the New York case, where they're saying they're not complying with immigration laws, there's going to be a whole body of case law that has to do with you can't tell states what to do. In the Elon Musk case, there's already 2 suits been filed yesterday in the conservative hobby horse, the appointments clause, saying, hey, you got such a big shot up there, you need to nominate and have him confirmed. So, you know, conservatives will even tell you it was more fun in a way when they were the rebels knocking at the ramparts. Now these doctrines have been developed and they cut very much against them. The basic theme here, though, on USAID, you said, you know, people suffering all over the country. They are suffering all over the world. You have these terrible series of anecdotes where people, you know, needing AIDS drugs or needing to keep their lights on or basic health stuff, that you're just having the whole sort of aid from the U.S. yanked out from under them. And I think people will realize that in the United States, it's much more sort of red states than blue ones. And, you know, there's a kind of brutality and a throwing your weight around to it all that has always victims. What they're doing and DOJ has victims, the people who are not going to be able to have their rights vindicated, and so people can just go into public corruption. And then here, the people who need this money are waiting on it week in, week out. You could imagine that Trump would have just been pandering to his MAGA audience and try to keep this mother's milk of money flowing. He's not, for just whatever reason. He and Elon Musk are just saying, you know, screw you to everyone. And it really is. This is the legal point that you read, but it's really the broader point. No one is trying at all to think about this, to give it any kind of measured analysis of these guys really need the money and these guys don't. It's just, we can do it. Let's just totally smash the whole deep state. And of course, who they're smashing are first, really solid career servants, and second, people who need the medicine, need the research, need the actual aid that is just being denied them wholesale. So it's some really ugly stuff and just, you know, throwing around power because they can. That's how I read it.
You know, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, we all know where this is going. The big story next week, I predict, is going to be the contempt hearings, the violations of the orders. And it seems to be, you know, this mass violation that not if it's happening, it is happening. And how do we know it's happening? Well, we know there's all of these injunctions that are saying you have to keep the money flowing. And it seems every day there is a new executive order or something freezing something new. And so those are not in congruity with each other. So, and look, we saw last week, for example, Governor Shapiro of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania said that Pennsylvania is not getting the federal funds that were allocated to it. Just one example. So a lawsuit had to be filed. notwithstanding the prior injunctions that require the Trump administration to continue the federal funding. So, when is the first federal judge going to go beyond the threats of sanctions and the threats of contempt and start holding people in contempt for this? And then what does that mean? And then what does that showdown look like? That'll be the story, I think, of next week for people to follow. Harry, any last?
It's not more. Just a couple quick points, Ben. You're totally right, and I agree with everything you said. First, to Shapiro, you do have all these state attorneys general stepping up. 19 join one suit, 22 join another, trying to fill the void. And then just second, there is just all this money that they are ignoring and not coming forward with. And that really is the basic theme. They're just thumbing their nose at Congress. And whereas past administrations have maybe tried to push on the envelope a little, they are really saying, screw you, we're not doing it, come and get us. And you're right, if they do that to the courts, that we're accustomed to thinking of the courts, Democrat, Republican, et cetera. I'd propose another distinction here, which is trial level courts versus higher courts. All the trial level courts are applying the law, and they're saying, hey, under the law, you're violating it completely. I'm going to enjoin at a certain point, but it's going to take a while. It'll work its way up, and we'll be on tenterhooks to see whether the Supreme Court will, in fact, also knock down the what is under current law, the lawless action of the administration. Maybe that's their long-range plan and hope. That would be, of course, a whole nother abomination. But for now, the district courts, and as you say, Trump appointees, Reagan appointees, George W. Bush are stepping up and saying, here's the law. The plaintiffs have really made a pretty clear case that you're violating the law. I'm going to enjoin and move on then to considering. I'm going to put a freeze on it and move on to considering whether it's okay or not. And that is basically where we are. 40 plus lawsuits, 6 injunctions. That's what's happening now in the country.
I want everybody to hit subscribe. We're on our way to 5 million subscribers here, but more importantly, you got to subscribe to Harry Litman's. Harry Litman's YouTube needs to hit 1 million. Let's get that to 1 million. Just look at the Talking Feds YouTube, look at the Talking Feds Substack, and the Talking Feds podcast. Just search Talking Feds, subscribe to all of them. It's where I get my legal news from. I hope you do as well. Thanks, Harry.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.